Hello, Greg from Balloon Market, and welcome to the third of our Balloon Market podcasts. This time we are talking about pricing. It's a very important subject and something that I think a lot of people don't really understand and don't do properly. So we had Mark from Qualatex come in, and they came in May 2017. And we filmed BMTV 120 talking about pricing. Now, Mark has been a trainer in the industry for many years, and part of that training is pricing, how you should price for your goods and services. So we sat down and we had a conversation. We talked about the concepts of pricing, how much you should charge for your time, we gave some real life pricing examples. And it's really all about adding value. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're listening to the podcast and you can't see the numbers on the screen. If you do want to see the numbers as we're talking about them, then you just head over to YouTube, the Balloon Market YouTube channel, and do a search for BMTV 120. If you just type 120 into the search tool there, that should come up. And it is also available in the BMTV Business playlist as well. We also introduced the Balloon Market interactive pricing tool. Now, that was based on the job costing form that has been around for years. However, I found that slightly confusing. So we've simplified it and we've made basically the spreadsheet. The pricing tool does all the difficult work for you now. So you just enter the figures you've got and it tells you what you should be charging. If you want to download that, it's completely free and you can do that at balloonmarket.co.uk/interactive-pricing-tool. Right, let's find out how to do some pricing. Pricing, costing.
Massive subject, so we're probably going to go around the houses a touch with this, but it is literally the most important thing if you're starting into the balloon business, or if you've never really taken any real sort of calculated method of pricing. How do people price?
That's a good question to start with, isn't it? Because there's so many different ways that you can price. For instance, retail, the standard way of pricing in retail, although it can vary, is you take the VAT exclusive price and multiply by 2.4. So you're effectively doubling and adding the VAT. So that's one way. What other ways are there?
I think the most common way that I see other people price is to have a look at what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And that can be useful to give you an idea of market value, but it's certainly something that I think is very, very dangerous to do.
I'd completely agree with you. I think particularly with certain high street shops selling balloons at a very, very low price point, and we were talking about it yesterday, how, if you've got 500, 800, 1,000 stores, you can buy in bulk and you are still making money when you're selling balloons at very low prices.
And most importantly, those stores calculate the time of working with the product very, very differently than if you're a business owner on your own, working in your business as well as on your business.
Yeah.
And that's in most cases where I've talked to businesses directly, of which I've been fortunate enough to do a lot about price over the years. First thing they don't do is charge for their time.
Yeah.
So, if nothing else from today, charging for your time is essential.
Yeah. I think people do just look at, okay, these products are costing me £5. As long as I charge more than £5, I'm all right. Particularly when they're starting out, people do want to get a bit of a name for themselves. And there's something to be said, I guess, for charging a low price to get out there. It's a marketing cost, if you like, if you're discounting initially to get yourself out there and get known.
Everything I always say, I never ever worry about somebody making a business choice to do something. The bit that worries me is that people hide their insecurities and fears about pricing and say it's a business choice to do it. And I think that's a very different thing. If you're confident at selling at a certain price and decide to do an offer for somebody, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
As long as you're aware what impact that has on your business. And I don't think always that's the case. If I've done anything at all in the industry, the one thing I've done is given some businesses the confidence to charge what they wanted to charge.
Yeah.
And the benefits of doing that are fantastic.
I think it is a confidence thing, because if people think that this costs me £5, well, I want to make a profit, but I don't want to be ripping people off. I can't charge them £15, can I? Well, yes, you can. But it's just having that confidence to believe in yourself, really, particularly when you're starting out. I think that's really important.
I think profit is the funny one, is that some people are embarrassed to make a profit.
Yeah.
And in essence, being a business is about making profit. And profit doesn't necessarily mean that you're then considered a fat cat that's stealing from the poor and giving to yourself.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that. You need profit in a business to be able to grow your business, to be able to employ other people, to be able to pay your suppliers, to be able to grow. And anybody that's successful in business needs to really get over the issue of making profit. But it's not an easy thing to do. Anybody that says pricing is easy to do is not telling you the full truth, because it is the most difficult, next to employing people and dealing with other people. It is, I think, the most difficult thing in business.
Yeah. But when you get it right,
the benefits are...
It's fantastic, isn't it?
And we are in a great industry to do that. Most customers really appreciate what you do for them. And everybody that I've gone through the process of helping them have confidence to price at a higher level have generally said the most surprising thing is there wasn't the negative reaction from their customers that they thought they were going to receive. And I think that'll become apparent. Anybody that wants to do increased prices, have a go, and you'll be surprised. Most of the time, I think you'll be surprised that you don't always get the negative kickback that you're going to have.
Would you say there's a rule or something that you should aim for when it comes to pricing, to costing what you're selling?
I heard one soundbite which, the more I think about it, is true. Doesn't necessarily help you to calculate costs, but the soundbite is that you should price something at the highest possible price that you can sell that item to a multiple number of customers for, and they feel it's good value. And that's the only soundbite I've ever come across that sort of sits well with everything else that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I've heard various theories about pricing, and one of them is you put your prices up, people keep buying. You put your prices up again, people keep buying. Put your prices up, everybody stops buying. Okay, you go back down to there, and then you're at your optimum price. And that can vary. Obviously, it's not as simple as that. You might not want to lose customers, and you've got to work at it. But it gives you an example. It's whatever the market will bear. Some people are not going to pay whatever it is you charge. If you were to tell people the cost price, they'd say, I'm not paying that, because some people's perception is that, a balloon should cost 50p or whatever it might be. They just won't pay it. If you then try and reduce your prices to try and get that customer, you're on a downward spiral in my eyes. I don't think that's ever healthy.
Yeah, and I think for me the key points around that are that not every business should be aiming to attract every single consumer.
Absolutely.
There's going to be a target market for your business that fits in with your lifestyle, that fits in with your capabilities, that fits in with how many customers you can service. Back to the idea of having 1,000 shops and doing that. It's perfectly reasonable for these businesses to aim to do things en masse and aim to be a budget seller. However, if you're an owner, manager, worker in your business and you're a one-man band or a one-woman band and you were trying to emulate that, everything's against you. Nothing would actually work. You haven't got the buying power. You haven't got the ability to service that many customers. So you have to really adjust what you're doing. And a lot of what we'll speak about today as what I call recommendations are really recommendations based on the average balloon business, that I've experienced. But these are recommendations, and I would also say it's really important that on every percentage increase or every costing point that we mention, that it's down to the individual business owner to calculate those based on their own needs.
Yeah. You're talking there about feeding the volume of customers, and people might think this is another misconception I think a lot of people have. If they're busy, they're profitable, and I think that's very scary. And I've got an example that from another industry, from the hotel industry, that a guy that I knew, one of his clients was a hotel, and they had a lot of business from coach trips. So a coach load of people, 50 people would turn up and they'd go in for the night, but they did really low rates for them. And this guy recommended to his client, double your costs. He said, "I can't do that. No way, we're going to lose the coach business. And what are we going to do?" He said, "Double your costs. You will lose the coach business. They're not going to come to you. However, you're going to have fewer people coming in, but at a higher profit margin. You're going to have lower staff costs, and you're going to get more profit that will allow you to then develop your hotel further." He did it. Exactly that happened. So, but eventually got occupancy, instead of being up at 90% that it was with the coach parties, came down initially, but they were making more money with lower occupancy, and then slowly took it back up. So they were rolling in it. Anyway, shall we get down to the nitty-gritty?
I think so.
And talk about how, in this industry, we should be pricing.
I'm going to be describing a job cost process that I've promoted to lots of businesses that I've dealt with before. The main elements of this, and we should have these up on the board, are you need to understand some certain costs in your business to be able to have an idea of what you're selling.
Yeah.
Okay. Some are really easy to do. So if we talk about those first, so the first thing is to get an idea of what your material costs are. What's the cost of your balloons, the cost of your ribbon, the cost of your weights, the cost of your helium, and be able to calculate your total direct costs of materials.
So when you say direct costs, you mean the costs of the physical stuff that you're using.
The cost of sale, the cost of the item that you're going to sell on that occasion.
Because that's what people think the cost is. That's the cost, just that, isn't it?
Really interesting. When you move forward through this process, you realise that that's actually quite a small element of the overall cost.
Okay, all right. Okay. So that's element number one, the direct costs.
In that direct cost, the bit that most people struggle with is, what do they pay for time? If I was to buy a card off a shelf, that card has been manufactured somewhere else, and somebody's sourced the card, somebody's cut it out, somebody's printed on it, somebody's packaged it, and there's a lot of time and money gone into that piece. Now with balloons, most of the time, the balloon that you buy as part of that direct cost isn't the finished article.
Yeah.
It's just a single balloon, and there's more that goes involved with it. So the bit we have to do with balloons as a service industry, the same as floristry or other service industries, is we have to calculate in our costs the time that we spent producing that element.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard varying people say varying different costs. Interestingly, the most expensive people tend to be the most successful people. But as an absolute minimum, I recommend to somebody that you shouldn't put in less than £15 an hour, or equivalent 25 pence a minute, for time.
That seems quite high though, Mark. £15 an hour. The minimum wage is, what is it, £7 something. So that seems like I'm being a bit greedy, don't you think?
Well, if you look at producing that element, if you were making bouquets of 3 and you were making them all day long without a gap, then you might say that the cost of that employee's time to do that all day long was only the minimum wage.
Okay.
However, the likelihood is that while you're creating this bouquet, that's fine. But when you're not creating the bouquet, when you're not making work all day, you're not actually being paid for that. So your element of time needs to be, real to how many hours you've got in the day and how many bouquets you're likely to sell.
So it's not, the time isn't necessarily reflecting or the cost of the time, just you making. It's also the thought that goes into it, the having to buy the balloons online, the having to whatever else you've got to do in connection.
And that's why I have got customers that have got £45 an hour in this exact same calculation. And generally, as I say, they're more successful. So this is something you decide as part of your business. But if you're, and a lot of the numbers I'll recommend here, I'm fairly confident if you're not putting in at least 25 pence a minute for your time, then a normal balloon business will be struggling to make money and pay themselves.
So essentially what you're saying is if you're not allowing for your time, in all likelihood, you will not succeed in this business.
You're not paying yourself.
Yeah.
So we've got a total direct costs, which include materials, helium and time. I think helium's an interesting one to talk about within the total direct costs and how you calculate your helium. And the one thing that Pioneer does really well for people in the Qualatex catalogue, on the back page are all the microfoil balloons, and you can work out quite easily how many balloons that you get out of a gas cylinder.
Yeah.
Where people get a bit confused is, well, I blew a 36-inch balloon up and I blew an 11-inch balloon up and I blew a 12-inch balloon up in that same cylinder, so that doesn't really help me. So what I'd advise people to do is to work out the cost of their cylinder and divide it down by the number of balloons, and know in the back of their catalogue here that this balloon takes X amount of pounds worth of gas.
Yeah.
And if you do that for each of the balloons that you sell on a regular basis, you'll know how much the element of cost in each balloon is. As an example, for a big top balloon here, we've calculated out that a helium cost for that is about £1.32.
Okay. I think that is something that people say, you can go to a shop or whatever and they'll fill a balloon for £1. Well, what balloon will they fill for £1? What would they fill one of those for £1? And so people just think it's not going to cost that much. It must. In fact, people don't even work it out.
No.
So that's the thing. That's a really, really useful chart in the back of the Qualatex catalogue. Tells you exactly how much helium, and you just work out how much that's going to cost you, as Mark says. Essential.
Biggest danger is to copy somebody else's prices, not knowing what they're paying for their gas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once we have our total direct costs, the next thing that we need to calculate on top of that is we need to take into account some of the costs of our business. And
like what?
Like rents, rates, insurances, what we'd class as overheads of a business. Now, this is something that you can't do precisely when you're guessing up front.
Okay.
You don't know, just for a lighter hearted point, you don't know how many toilet rolls you're going to use in a year.
143 it was,
really?
Mark. Yeah.
So you wouldn't know exactly what that is. And at the end of the year, your accountant could give you an idea to help you out and work backwards.
But if you're just starting out and you're working from home,
doesn't help you, does it?
You don't really know, do you?
So again, I've got a recommendation, which is a minimum recommendation, and it's a recommendation of 35% of the cost of a selling price of an item should be added in there to cover your overheads.
Okay.
So for example, if you sell a pen for £1, 35 pence of that should be added in there for your overheads.
And then I guess after you've been operating for a year or two and you've got a couple of years worth of accounts, you can look back at your overheads, your indirect costs, if you like, and you can you might find out it's just 25%, and then you could adjust in the future. Is that what you mean?
Very true.
Okay.
But you also might find out it's 200%.
Yeah.
But I think if you're not taking into account some of those things, that's where people struggle with cash flow, because they'll get insurance for their van, or they'll get their rates bill, and if they haven't been taking a small amount of everything that they sell, then that can become a problem.
I think it's very hard as well, particularly when a lot of people in our industry do start working from home. It's like, well, you know, I'm at home. It's not costing me anything. I'm at home. Well, if you were going out to work before, would you have had the heating on all day? And when you're working at home in the winter, you're probably going to use the heating. So you need to allow for that sort of stuff as well, I'm guessing.
And when I'm seeing people that do work from home versus people that work from a shop, I actually use exactly the same calculation. And the reason is, if you've got a shop front, that's your window to the world, that's your advertising. It might not be your total advertising, but you have a footfall of customers. If you're home-based at home, you have to do some form of advertising and marketing, or you have to spend time and get out and approach people for people to know your business is even there. And that has cost to it as well. So I always start at that basic rate of overhead percent at 35%.
Okay, all right. So we've got some figures there. We're talking percentages and things. Should we do an actual example to show people?
Yeah, but we've forgotten one last thing.
What?
And that's a potential profit.
That's what's left, isn't it?
So we're going to have to put an amount into our selling price.
Okay.
So we're going to guesstimate and put an amount of percentage in to our selling price. And again, the recommended rate I put in for a small business is a 20% actual profit at the end of the process.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you're going to take your selling price, and you're saying that you will allow 35% of that and 20% of that, so a total of 55%, and that's going to cover your indirect costs and profit, because you don't actually know what they are.
You don't know what they are, you don't know what the split will be, but you put some amount of money in to the pot for those elements.
So that would leave, I guess, 45% is that's the direct costs we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Okay, how do we work all that out?
Well, the easiest way is to do it on a sort of piece of paper, on a form.
Yeah.
And if we take the simplest of designs, a foil balloon design on ribbon with weight, and I've based these costs down including VAT. So we've got the actual shape at 356.
Yeah.
And that's including VAT. We've got the weight at 54p, the ribbon at a penny each, the helium inside the foil at 132.
Yeah.
That gives me a total material cost of 543, and then we're going to inflate it, and I've put in 13 pence for half a minute inflation, and that's going to give me a total direct cost of 556.
Okay.
And then on top of that, we're going to put our 55% markup to make our selling price. And our 55% markup brings us to 1236.
So that 55% markup, how do you, forgive me if I'm not the best at maths, okay, so how do we work out, so we've got that figure, how do we add 55% of what?
The easiest way is by dividing the whole one by the 45% direct cost. So if you divide by 0.45, you end up with the whole amount, which is the 45 plus the 55.
I see. So you take your direct costs, you divide that by 0.45.
Yep.
And that actually gives you a bigger number, which is your selling.
Which is your whole selling price.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so that would get us to 1236, but 1236 isn't a very retail-y.
It's not something you see on the shelves very much, is it? No.
So I've guesstimated then that the next sort of price point that I would use is $12.99.
Okay. And that seems more than reasonable to me for that balloon.
Yeah. For a large shaped balloon, I think that's absolutely fine. However, if you decide to do different amounts, you know, for your business, if you decide that that's all you're selling and you're selling thousands a day online, it might be a very different calculation in terms of the percentages. But as an individual selling from a shop, I think that's absolutely fine.
See, I think as well, there's been a lot of people, and I think it's happened in the industry as well. People say, what would you charge for that, Mark? And historically, it's always been, well, it's going to vary. It depends on where you are. It depends on, you know, what your competition's like. But it really does. because if you could charge $18.99 for that, because it's a very posh area, and you know that people will pay that because it's, I don't know, footballers' wives or something like that, and it might just, you know, that's nothing, that's fine. Charge 25 quid and they'll go for it. Some
of the most successful businesses I know would charge a hell of a lot more for that, especially if it was, you know, delivered or you know, the value to the end person changes greatly depending on what you're doing for them personally. And that's what you have to think about. And value your time is important. What you do for people is something that a lot of people are willing to pay for. Not everybody, but a lot of people are. And it's those people that we want to attract.
But also, I mean, if you do have a market of people that wouldn't be willing to pay 25, 30, 40, 50 pounds or whatever for that, and they probably would pay $11.99, well, if you know you're going to get a lot of those sales, that might be acceptable to you. Is that okay? Is that all right to sell it at that?
It's down to you, and as I say, that might be absolutely fine. But as I say, just think about how many you'd have to sell to make exactly the same amount of money. What's interesting is that what I teach people to do and what Pioneer promotes for Qualatex product is actually the opposite. What you would do is you'd think, hang on a minute, if I've got somebody that's close to wanting to buy this item at $12.99, why don't I add some creativity and add some design in here, and by adding some air-filled elements to a large shape, could I move that perceived value to a different position for the customer?
I've got a feeling you probably can. Is that right?
Should we do an example?
Let's do an example of that.
For this one, we've got our clown design here.
Okay.
And we've got some nice flowers, and we've got some twisted elements, and we've got a nice printed balloon base. Now what's interesting here, and I won't go through all the figures, we'll keep them up there, but what's interesting is that everything below here in terms of product cost is around £2.
Okay.
So on our job cost form, when we get to the end of this job cost form here, I can actually calculate this out as a selling price of $17.13. But when we were talking before we did the calculation, everybody in the room went, well, that's a $19.99 design. So what we've done is we've added some excitement, we've added value, and we've ended up with the perceived value being much, much greater. Now, if I decide to discount and I decide to do that at $18.99, it's really good value. And I might sell lots.
So as an example there, that's another large foil. If you could arguably sell it at $12.99, as you could there, but by adding £2 worth of adornments, you take it up to $15.99, but you can actually sell it for $19.99. So that's an extra £4.
And I think the biggest thing is that, you know, have these items available for customers, be confident about their price points, and have a multiple number of price points, and then your consumer can decide, because not everybody's the same. Some people will like something and want to pay extra for it. Some people will actually, no, I'll go for the value item. And all of a sudden, if you've got elements that you're promoting at the higher value, at higher price points, then actually $12.99 might all of a sudden seem really good.
It's interesting what you say there about have these available. Do you mean actually inflate, if you've got a retail shop, for instance, have them there?
There's no better way than promoting balloons than people actually experiencing them. They're three-dimensional, they move, they're brightly coloured, and they look great.
I have to tell you, a bit of an aside here, Mark. I've seen shops over the years, and they've got inflated balloons, or at least they were inflated 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the foil balloons are basically saggy. That's not what you want to do, is it?
It's not, because what you'll do is, you know, if you look at one of those displays, you're saying, I want you, Mr. Customer, to pay me $19.99 for something that doesn't look fantastic.
But it's costing me money to inflate new balloons or top it up with helium or whatever.
It is, and I think that's also part of that contingency that we were talking about, part of the amount of the markup that you've got to put on top of your work to actually help you promote your business.
I guess it's a marketing cost, isn't it? Your marketing is actually showing off what it is. So, yeah. So if the costs of that are what are the costs of that example?
The material costs of this example are $7.71.
So $7.71 in marketing, but you're going to make that back straight away in the first one you sell.
Yeah. It's not difficult, is it?
It's a no-brainer.
But the big thing is to spend some time on this for your business. And there are different choices in business. You might decide, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to buy a Qualatex balloon. I'm going to buy a really inexpensive balloon. I'm going to go down the road of trying to be offer the cheapest element out there. And that's where the cautionary tale is about the downside is potentially by downscaling what you're offering and downscaling the price points, essentially you're downscaling what you make as well. It's much better to work on an upward spiral and develop something that's creative, develop something that's exciting. Yes, your customer base that's likely to buy it might shrink slightly, but as long as there's enough customers that want that product, then and your designs are great, then you're going to make more money. Yeah, absolutely. There's one other design right here behind me. Yeah, so this is a classic bouquet, and this is really the first design that I started to use the job cost form on lots and lots, and essentially it's because it's only a collection of latex and a couple of foil. It's a really important design because you can realise that by having a coordinated finished design where the latex matches the foil, you actually are adding value. Right from the very basic design, you're adding value to that piece. Yeah. And they do take, that's going to take you 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes to inflate. So it's a great example to work through as a costing point. So let's do that. Let's quickly go through that as a final one. Okay, so as a final design, we've got a microfoil, in this case 136 including VAT, and there's 2 of those, 11-inch latex, 3 of those at 27p, the weight at 54p, ribbons a penny each, helium, I've calculated this it's the same cost for the latex balloon as it is for the foil, just because they take the same volume. But that's 42p per balloon, and then we would also high float that design, and the cost of high float for each latex balloon is around 7p. So our total material cost is just under the £6.50. So when you've calculated that out with your 5 minutes inflation time, your total direct costs £7.68. And then once you've put your minimum of 55% markup on there, you're looking at a price of £17.07. Based on those prices. So you could choose to go a bit higher than that, £17.99. I think that's okay, £17.99 for that. Exactly, and I think that's what most people are doing now. The interesting thing with this bouquet is that before all the price increases this year on gas and balloons and the whole piece, most people would have sold that for £16.99. But this year's the year that people might decide, do you know what, we're going to put that to £17.99. So there you go. I hope you found that interesting and useful. As I said at the beginning, I think pricing is such an important subject. It is worth spending some time focusing on it and looking at your prices. If you do want to see the examples, as I said in the intro, just head over to the Balloon Market YouTube channel and look for BMTV 120, or you can look in the playlist, this BMTV business, and you will find it there. If you do want to download the Balloon Market interactive pricing tool, once again, that is balloonmarket.co.uk/interactive-pricing-tool. Thanks for listening, and speak to you soon.